I lived here for a long time. Um, I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota. And my dad was born um, the on the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota at Fort Yates. That's the name of the town. And he was born in 1929. And um, he was born there, and he lived there till he was about your age. And in his family, my grandparents had 8 children, and 3 of them died in infancy or childhood. So they had 5 children that lived to be adults. And so when they were halfway grown up, they moved to St. Paul from North Dakota, and they tried to make a life there. Well, my dad, being in junior high, he from going from a reservation, and the house they lived in was just a small wooden shack with a faucet in one corner. So very rough conditions. Moved to St. Paul, to an area that's was a slum at the time. How many of you have been to St. Paul? Have you been to the Capitol? That's maybe coming up. Or in 6th grade, usually they go to the Capitol, don't
I
they?
guess I'm not sure.
Not anymore?
No.
Well, anyway, where the Capitol is, between the Capitol and the cathedral, the big Catholic church that's close by, that whole area, it's all boulevards and very fancy and neat and tidy now. When I was little, that was a slum area, very rundown old houses. And so my grandparents moved there with their family, and there's 2 older daughters that were almost ready to graduate. But my dad was in junior high, and he went to Mechanic Arts High School, which is down in that area. He never finished high school. So my native relatives were very poor. But when my grandfather, his name was Jesse Graybear, when he was on the reservation, he was a police. He was a policeman for the reservation. He was on the police force there, and his sister-in-law, my great aunt, told me that there was a curfew, and if you weren't in, Jesse would come looking for you. He made sure the curfew was abided. I have a picture of my grandfather with other federal police that were confiscated stills, people that were making their own alcohol on the reservation. They didn't allow alcohol on the reservation, so they confiscated all the stills. And there's a picture with dozens of stills and confiscated bottles of alcohol that were going to be destroyed. So that's what he did on the reservation, and he was probably in his 50s when he moved to St. Paul, and they had to start life over there. Well, my father he never finished high school, like I said, and he decided to change his name, probably because he was getting a lot of harassment or grief because of his name. And he told my mom to not let me know that I was part Indian, because he didn't want me to be teased and made fun of by my peers. So he thought I could pass as a white person, and he thought it'd be better if I just didn't even know that I was part Native. So I didn't find that out till later. I mean, I was still a kid, but I just thought it was kind of sad that my dad didn't want me to know that I was part Native because he thought it would just make my life harder. So that was his experience, and he made his living by driving cab, and he was a commercial painter. He was in the Painters Union in St. Paul, so he painted houses and insides of buildings, and he drove cab for a living. And just to, so I grew up in St. Paul, and we didn't have a lot of, my exposure to what it meant to be Native was just hanging out with family members. Like my grandparents lived in St. Paul. They moved back and forth several times. They couldn't make up their mind. They moved back to the reservation, they moved back to St. Paul, and moved back to the reservation. They did that 2 or 3 times before they just settled down there. But my experience of being Native was just hanging out with my dad's family. And so it wasn't the same as people growing up, other Natives who grew up on the reservation. So they're culturally, like I said, my dad didn't even want me to even know I was Native. And so I just had to pick things up from being around my family. And my grandfather was a very interesting man. He was 65 years old when I was born. So I just remember him. He was full-blood Native, and my grandmother is a quarter. So that makes me a little over a quarter Native. But I remember my grandfather in their little house in St. Paul. He worked in people's yards. He did yard work to earn a little money. After he was quit being a policeman and when he was retired. But he had a typewriter, an old-fashioned typewriter, and an old worn-out Bible right next to it, next to the window in his kitchen. And he used to write letters advocating for Native American rights and different things that involved Native Americans. Right until he also rolled his own cigarettes. He had papers in a pouch in his pocket, and wore overalls, and he worked hard. And he did care about us. But I remember him sitting my brother on his knee and bouncing him and singing Native songs. So there's a lot of those are the things that I remember personally. And but I learned more as an adult and exposed myself trying to figure out what it meant to be Native. When I went to college the first time, right after high school, I went to the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, and I got a loan from the tribe. I'm a registered tribal member at Standing Rock, so I was able to get a loan to go to school, which if I finished wasn't a loan. They would pay, but I didn't finish. So I had to pay all the money back that I borrowed. But when I went to school for a year, and because I had tribal money, I met other Native students. Because we're in Minnesota, the majority of Native people in Minnesota are Chippewa. So I met other Native students, and I wondered at the time, because I'm part Native, what does this mean? I mean, am I supposed to, all my friends from college were, they were gathering wild rice because that's what Chippewas do. But the North Dakota, of course, there isn't much wild rice over there. So it was kind of confusing to me because I thought, well, does this mean I should dress differently? It was kind of confusing to me and eventually I figured out that being Native to me is just, it's a piece of who I am, and it affects me and my ideas and what I think about the world or what's important. But I kind of had to make a list of all the things that about me and decide what is at the top of the list. And for me, the most important thing is being a Christian. I gave my life to the Lord when I was 11 years old, and that is what I am first. I'm also a woman. I am a mother. I am a grandmother. I am a quilter. I am a bird fanatic. I love to swim. There's a lot of parts of me, the things that make me who I am, and being Native is a part of that. So I feel settled and calm about that, and I know who I am, and I'm comfortable with that, and I'm very proud of the part. My experience hasn't been the same as what my dad went through. So I can be proud of that part, and I don't have a lot of bad memories connected. Although in high school, some of my friends, my dad changed his name from Great Bear to Great Bar, so people would not know right away. But I still got razzed a lot from people in high school. It gave me funny Indian names and different things like that. But nothing terribly scarring, or everybody gets razzed and made fun of. Unfortunately, we all have to deal with that for something. Who has never been made fun of for something about them personally? It's kind of a rare thing. So it's something we all can share, where something that somebody gives us a hard time about. That's the way we look, or our name, or something that's different about us that we get made fun of. So that's something we all share, and we all have to learn to deal with, and it should make us more sympathetic if we've had some bad experiences with that. But my grandfather was born in 1887. My grandpa was born in 1887. And the Battle of Little Bighorn happened. Who's heard of Battle of Little Bighorn? Okay, 1876. So he was born 8 years after that happened. So he was a baby right after, during all the time when all that conflict was going on. Who's heard of Wounded Knee? Okay, Wounded Knee was 1890. So he was 3 years old when that happened. There's a lot of, so he grew up in a time, and this is the hard thing with black people who used to be slaves, and people, and also Native people. When your whole culture is disrupted, when you're studying about history and you find out about people who their homes were destroyed, their livelihood is destroyed, their families were broken up, everything they had was taken away, and there's somebody attacking you and killing members of your family, and those are hard things to recuperate from as a people. And it's bad enough when there's just some families that experience that, but when every single family, say like in this town, if somebody came and completely just everybody round you up and you're moving, and you're going to be all herded together in one little spot, and you just lost your job, and everything you owned is gone, and some of your family members have died in the process, and So when something like that happens, what happens to the next generation? It's, it's pretty hard to recuperate from that. So it takes a while. That's not just something you say, oh, well, bad week. Hope things are better next month. That kind of tragedy is hard to recuperate from. So Native Americans today, all experiences are different depending on a lot of different circumstances, but generationally, we're still feeling the repercussions from that. And I personally don't think there can be an intervention from the outside to just, okay, let's make it all better. Let's give everybody $1 million and a new house, and then let's just call it good. That isn't going to fix it. I think that for natives, they have to come up with the answer and the solutions themselves, and do it, and that's called self-determination. And that is a very messy process because people are messy, and there's a lot of corruption and greed and a lot of things on all sides. There's nobody that's 100% that can't say that they're just all innocent victims, and that there's, that they can completely be trusted 100%. So they're just going to have to wrestle and figure that out on their own. But I just wanted to say that these things might be familiar to you. The names Crazy Horse, Red Cloud, Black Elk, Spotted Tail, Gull, Red Shirt, Russell Means, Leonard Peltier, Rain in the Face, Sitting Bull. Those were all chiefs, well, not Russell Means, Peltier, but all the rest were chiefs from the tribe of Indians that my dad and grandpa were related to. So there's a lot of really amazing history, and makes for interesting reading. So in 2014, Obama visited Standing Rock Reservation and spoke there about Indian issues. And so it's still very much in the news. And I wanted to say, I found a quote that Sitting Bull said. He said, "Let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children." He was shot by agency police in 1890 at Standing Rock, and because they thought he was trying to create another uprising, and just a lot of misunderstandings. But his intentions were for the good of his people. It was just during a time of a conflict between the United States government and his people. A lot of anger over Little Big Horn and all of that. A lot of revenge stuff. So Native Americans today, my personal experience is good. I have nothing bad in my own personal experience, but I have never, like I said, I've never lived on the reservation, and I haven't experienced the good stuff that comes with that or the bad stuff that comes with that. But generally, over the whole United States, the statistics for poverty and suicide and drug and alcohol use are higher among the Native American population than any other racial group. So there's a lot of serious, bad things that they have to deal with. And and just on kind of a funny note, I go to a Native American clinic in Sisseton, so I drive 75 miles to see the doctor. And if you get in Indian country, there's always a radio station that plays powwow music. And so I like to tune that in when I'm over there. And it's kind of interesting that usually don't understand what they're saying, but they're starting to incorporate more English words in part of it. And I just thought this was so hilarious. They were singing this Indian song with powwow drums and everything, and then they sang the English part, and it said, "I don't need a tattoo of you on my arm because I think about you all the time in my heart." That's what the song was about. So there's a lot. Culture changes, and Indians don't walk around in buckskin, but they do celebrate in Indian ways, just like you guys celebrate. Who eats lutefisk for Christmas? Anybody? Fix lutefisk at your house, or lefse? Lefse?
Oh, lefse.
Yeah. So I mean, there's certain things that you from your own heritages that you celebrate and keep in touch with. No matter what it is, there's something unique about your own family history that you want to hang on to and remember, and that is when I taught. I'm a teacher. I went back to school when I was 40, and I got a degree in teaching, and part of my practice teaching was at Sisseton, and every morning those kids, to start the school day, they have a drum ceremony, and so I wanted to play a piece of it's a video. It's some young students drumming. I mean, there's cell phones and basketball and a lot of things that you enjoy too. So, yep. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a couple. As you were talking, a lot of the things that I've been talking about with my class, and we've been doing this unit kind of all of us together too.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really interesting and kind of affirming some of the things that you had said you've been talking to our kids about. And they're doing a little bit of research trying to learn some more about Native culture now, and which is why Mrs. Good brought you in too. And one of the questions that you talked about is you have a direct connection to your grandpa being the police officer on the reservation. And just last hour, one of my students was researching, trying to figure out what are some differences between like the law enforcement that is in the state versus on the reservation, and like, because then there was like peace officers too, that they were called peace officers, and I couldn't, I mean, we were both researching together at the same time, and you have a direct connection to that, or you could maybe speak about it. Like, do they go through the same, you know, just here in Alec, we have Alec Tech that trains police officers. Do they have that sort of same training, or do they go out off the reservation to get the training and come back? Because the laws, and I don't know if you could speak about that too, it's kind of a twofold thing. The laws are different too. So either one of those.
Okay. I'm not sure how they train their police officers now, but I did hear something on the news just within the last week about them changing some of the laws because tribes are recognized as a separate government, but I think there are very, very few that did not sign treaties with the United States government. And I think Red Lake is one that's considered an independent nation. So they're still not under any authority of the, there's some things that's what they're trying to figure out, because there's federal laws, just like the marijuana laws now. Some states it's legal, but it's still federally, it's still not legal. So there's that conflict. And they were trying to get it more uniform, because I think some people, if they've committed crimes, could go to the reservation and no policeman could apprehend them unless the reservation police did. And sometimes you'll see TV shows or whatever about the tribal police and the other police bumping heads about who has authority and where the reservation, boundaries are. So that's still definitely an issue. But they're trying to make it so things like murder and some federal offenses, they can't stop at the border, that they have, like the United States police would have authority to go in and apprehend somebody. Because the tribes have their own courts, they have tribal council, they have somebody who's in charge. So yeah, the government, it's very complicated, and the government is separated. So it's a good question, very complicated.
And there are documents online, but for a seventh grader, it's hard to sift through some of those things.
Yes.
I mean, so you can get some basic information, but that was one that several people in each one of my classes maybe was trying to find more information about. It's an interesting piece.
It is.
Many years ago, when I was in college, I did Native American Studies. Schools look very different. Reservation schools look very, I don't mean physically look different. Curriculum, expectations, courses, attendance look very different. What do you see the differences now, where maybe there aren't? High school kids need to have so much of this and so much of that. And
I'm not sure about right now how the requirements are. I know just anecdotally, I mean, when I was at Sisseton, they were talking about a student then that did so well at the tribal school, and then went to college and just absolutely couldn't handle it. They were not prepared So I know when I was teaching over there, practice teaching over there, that my the teacher I was working under was talking to me about signs for huffing gas and things like that. So there is the poverty and the kind of life, you know. Actually, my dad was an alcoholic, and he died when he was 38 years old. So of those 5 that lived in my dad's family that lived to adulthood, 3 of those 5 died before they were 40, all because of drug and alcohol related diseases. So I only had one aunt and one uncle that lived into their 70s. So when your family is disrupted by that kind of stuff, it makes education much harder. And then when you're living on a reservation, and in I think 1 in 4 was one statistic I was able to pick up about the living in poverty, a very high rate of poverty. And then if you have parents who, a mother who drank when she was pregnant, then you are dealing with fetal alcohol, and that's makes very difficult to do well in school. So you have multiple strikes against you. And if, like my dad never finished high school, and of course my grandfather, but the other thing, it's always a mix, because my grandmother's mom, my great grandmother on my grandma's side, she was sent away to an Indian school, Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania. She was a very bright lady. She lived into like 70s or 80s. She knew 4 languages. She was a very smart woman and quite accomplished. So it just depends on the situation for each one. But overall, and then if all of your friends are huffing gas and drinking alcohol when you're in grade school, it's hard to say no. I mean, peer pressure is pretty hard to deal with. So, and a very small community.
My aunt lives in Bemidji, but she is a librarian at Cass Lake School, and most of the kids there are Native American.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reservation in Cass Lake?
Yeah, there's Leech Lake, and see, most of the Indians in Minnesota are Chippewa or Ojibwe or Anishinaabe, or there's being political correct is kind of tricky. To me, it does not make that much difference, because I mean the name Sioux is sort of kind of not very popular, but I mean that's what I grew up, and then it's Lakota. There's 3 language groups: Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota. Within the Sioux people, and so my relatives were from the Lakota bunch, but so it's all the Sioux, the Sioux uprising or Dakota conflict or whatever you want to call it. That was in 1860, I think late 1860s that they were, or mid 1860s when they were. All the Dakota were supposed to leave Minnesota, and that's when they went into Dakota territory. So, so you find most of the Lakota and Nakota people over in South Dakota. Any other questions?
Where did you get all the information about your relatives from? Like what source?
What source? Well, from talking to them, and I also, my brother lives on the reservation. My brother moved to the reservation and lives there. He is involved in, he was trained in drug and alcohol treatment, counseling. So he's lived there for over 10 years. And he and I went to see my grandma's sister, and I wrote down a lot of stuff about her. I'm also, because I'm a registered tribal member, she told me a lot of personal stories about my family, and also gave me pictures of them. And I have documentation from the tribe about who my ancestors were. So it's all kind of written down, and I'm part of the tribal records.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have 5. There's 5 in my family. So, and I'm the oldest.
Do any others live on the reservation?
Nope, only my brother.
Okay.
What about hunting laws? Are those different?
Yes.
Okay.
My brother, actually, because I'm a tribal member, I could go there and get a license and shoot animals.
Cool.
Yep, and the ones that live there, the way they run things, because of my brother lives there. There's quite a few different seasons when they can hunt, and if they find that someone has illegally hunted there and they confiscate the animal, they just put it in the tribal freezer and they give it to the elders. I mean, the older people that need food, so they give it away to people that need it. Because it's North Dakota, it's a little different too. I think I'm not a real big gun person, but you can use more rifles and things like that than you can't use in Minnesota.
Do any of the reservations, like, do they still have any chiefs? Like, do they still have a person that they would call a chief?
It's called, yeah, at the one I come from, it's a tribal chairman. We wouldn't call him a chief anymore, but tribal chairman, and they're elected.
Why did your dad not finish high school?
Well, I think partly because I don't know what kind of education he got at the tribe. I'm not sure what kind of a school that was, but he probably, and probably just overwhelming culturally from moving from the middle of North and South Dakota to St. Paul, to a school with, there's mostly, I don't know what kind of racial mix was at Mechanic Arts, but it probably was just more than he could handle and he just quit. And I don't think it was that uncommon. Like, my mom graduated from high school, but I think it was not that unusual just to go through the 8th grade and stop going to school. Like, going to high school is optional.
So when like they were beating that drum, were they actually saying real words?
Well, that's what I've always wondered too. Their languages are intact, but I think sometimes it's just singing, and like we go la 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 la. I don't think it's always specific words. I think that's mostly just kind of hollering. But there are the language is intact, and they do use words, but not always for the trumpet.
Do you like and stuff?
Well, that was one interesting thing I was going to mention, because when, like, there's pemmican and the old Indian food, when they were put on reservations and were told to farm and they didn't know how, and there was, I mean, back in North Dakota, it didn't really grow much for crops. I mean, some people did. They would grow some crops along the river and stuff like that, but it was not culturally the way they were used to living. They were mostly hunters and gatherers. Well, and then you're supposed to just stay in one little plot of land and don't go anywhere. They did hunt, but when they were dependent on government issue commodities, and so they got lard and white flour and cornmeal and things like that. And so Native American food changed. And I don't know if you've ever heard of fry bread.
Oh, that's
Yeah, it's really good. It's really bad for you. It's just deep fried white bread. So that's kind of become a Native American food, and it was just really because all they were given were government commodities. So that's another issue. The Indians' health is not very good because they're, the food that was available to them isn't very, very healthy.
How old were you when you found out you were eating?
I was in grade school, but I can't remember the exact time. But later, my mom told me your dad didn't even want you to know you were.
What, like, in tribes, is there like sports that you play?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, basketball is very big.
Yes.
And there fierce competition within tribes and stuff. Yeah, they're quite fond of basketball, and also because warrior societies were a big deal. They're very usually the opening ceremony in a powwow. They honor the military. Anyone that served in the military is considered a warrior. Anyone that's a veteran is very much honored. So that's still, that little thread kind of carried through and is transferred over.
Like with the hunting laws and stuff, or fishing laws, the different too.
They are, I'm not as familiar with those. I know in Minnesota it's still in like Mille Lacs Lake, it's a very big deal. But that's in North Dakota. I'm not sure if fishing is as big of an issue there as it is in Minnesota.
Was your dad gone by the time you found out then?
No, he was still alive. I was 15 when he passed away.
Is there a reason that you go to a Native American clinic?
It's free. I don't have insurance.
Did you play any sports?
No. Hopscotch, jump rope, swimming was about it.
You had spoke, oh, sorry. I just wanted to ask quick about the languages. Did your grandfather then speak Native, and what language was it? Was it the
It was a Lakota.
Lakota? And then did your dad also speak it too?
No, my dad did not. Like, he just sort of left the Indian
Sure.
part of him, the Indian identity, just left it behind. But my aunt, his sister, did tell me that, because I was asking her for whatever she could give me, and she said, she just shook her head, and she said that because they were teenagers when they moved to St. Paul, she said, I remember my dad bringing me out and trying to show me herbs and things like that and different medicinal things. And she said, Pop, that's old. Don't care about that anymore. It doesn't, we don't need that stuff anymore. So she says, I wish I had paid attention, but I did not.
Like some of the tribes do, did your parents ever like tell you like a legend to teach you a lesson how we learn?
Nope. Like I said, my dad really didn't, he never talked about it, he just wanted to leave that sort of behind. So, and for like I said, my grandpa, I remember him bouncing my brother on his knee and singing kind of native, like powwow music. And if you're interested at all, I know around here it's hard to find native stuff, but if you like at Mille Lacs Lake towards the end of summer, a lot of times we'll have powwows because most tribes have casinos and all that. So there's a tourist part, and there's some people that still kind of hold to the Native American religions and stuff, and the sweat lodges and the smudging and burning kind of sage grass and things like that. take it pretty seriously as a religion. There's kind of a touristy part of it too. If you're curious, there's lots of times when everyone is welcome to come to powwows. And Morris, University of Minnesota Morris, every spring has a powwow. It's really fun. I love going to powwows. And when they start dancing and playing music, I just get kind of all choked up. Because there's just a link to my family that means a lot to me. Anybody else?
Is there like any traditional games that your ancestors played that you?
No, nothing that was passed on. I know gaming was a big deal, gambling was a big deal. My dad loved to play poker. So most, I don't know of a reservation that doesn't have a casino. So that's a bit of a thread, and I think part of the self-determination piece of it, there's an opportunity for them to maybe, because there isn't a lot to draw a person out to the middle of North Dakota as far as touristy stuff. So my reservation has a casino, like so many, and it does provide some employment and some means. There's a lot of questionable pieces of that, but it is a one way, depending on how the tribe uses it, of them to help make them better. I mean, provide better infrastructure and better, possibility for education, or, it's up to them how they use it. So it's an opportunity for them to maybe make themselves better. But not all of them do that very well. So, anybody else?
Do the Native American mascots affect you?
That's another really good question. I was hoping that would come up. Because UND is no longer the Fighting Sioux, it's now the Fighting Hawks. And I think that's a great idea. And I do hate the Atlanta Braves, the CHOP. I can't, it just bugs me to no end. And I think there are better things they can name. Earlier in my life, I just thought, well, it's a mascot and it's Fighting Sioux and they are hard fighters. But then as I was looking into it, I heard story, because Standing Rock played a big part in fighting that. They were one of the big pushers for getting them to change that and not giving up. And I read some stories about personal experiences of Indians that went to that school that were called just unthinkable things. I think it's better to leave race out of it. And I admire the Vikings for going along with it. Maybe that's a little different situation. But anyway, I think under the circumstances, the Fighting Hawks is a better name. So, anybody else? I don't know how much time I got.
You did awesome. We just have a couple minutes left before they have the bell rings, like 3, right? Or 4. So, 2:01, yeah, yep. Let's give a nice round of applause. So, we weren't sure,